Riding the lead was Alan Parry, who's been at the Royal Mews for a decade, and John Nelson, a veteran of royal occasions, who's worked at the Mews for 43 years. The carriage itself, with its crimson satin seats and red leather, was restored just a few years ago. For the Queen, the Scottish state coach was chosen instead of an open-top carriage because of the threat of rain. As they turned in beneath Horse Guards Arch, a chance to draw breath away from the noise of the crowds. Holding hands, the bride and groom made their way onto the parade itself. And a salute from members of the household cavalry. For Catherine, now Her Royal Highness, a further taste of life to come. For the young bridesmaids and page boys, a day they'll be able to talk about for the rest of their lives. Prince Harry showed them the ropes, encouraging them to wave. For the Queen, a sovereign's escort. The 1st and 2nd divisions were provided by 25 men of the Life Guards, the 3rd and 4th by the Blues and Royals, another full complement of 25 officers. And the field officer of the escort for the Queen? Lieutenant Colonel Dan Hughes. A scene redolent of centuries of history. The household cavalry have been involved in such grand royal occasions for 350 years. A sea of red as the lifeguards signalled the approach of the bridal carriage on the last leg of the journey. As the newlyweds passed by the Victoria Memorial, a reminder of just how many people were watching. The banks of television studios and hundreds of cameras from worldwide media clearly visible. On the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, the Guard of Honour, made up by the Welsh Guards, was waiting. More than 100 men. And the band of the 1st Battalion, the Welsh Guards. And so their carriage rolled through the gates of the palace that will one day be their home. On the carriage ride, Catherine had asked her husband whether he was happy now. He had left her in no doubt that the answer was yes. The service, he'd said, had been beautiful. And he told her how proud he was that she was now his wife. In the central courtyard, with a helping hand from her husband, the Duchess climbed carefully out of her carriage. They were welcomed, and no doubt congratulated, by the master of the Queen's household, Air Vice Marshal David Walker. And so into the palace to prepare for the official photographs and the first of 2 receptions. For the crowds outside, there was still a grand procession to watch and enjoy. As the Queen and Duke arrived home, she was heard to say the whole spectacle had been amazing. And for someone who normally keeps her emotions very private, that was a measure of how special the day had so far been. And for Mr. and Mrs. Middleton, the grandest ride to Buckingham Palace they will ever experience, as they travelled in the Australian state coach with Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall. Next came one of the great set pieces of any royal wedding: the appearance of the newlyweds and the rest of the royal family on the palace balcony. But before that could happen, Everything and everyone had to be in place. The pomp and circumstance of a royal wedding is steeped in hundreds of years of tradition. And what a spectacle for the crowds. Martin Brunt, Sky News crime correspondent, was watching.
For the capital's police, keeping the peace around the royal wedding was one of the biggest challenges they had faced for many years. Security, crowd control and safety. They were all issues full of potential difficulties that could have spoiled the big day. There were 1 million people on the street and a global live TV audience of 2 billion. The Metropolitan Police could not afford to get it wrong. From its nearby headquarters at New Scotland Yard, the force had been planning its operation for many weeks. In the end, 5,000 police officers, joined by military personnel, ensured that the pomp and ceremony went uninterrupted. Perhaps the biggest challenge came after the service, moving thousands of revellers towards Buckingham Palace. Nobody wanted to miss the royal balcony appearance.
In a well-rehearsed and highly disciplined operation, hundreds of police formed a human chain to shepherd tens of thousands of well-wishers as close to the palace as possible.
For those who couldn't get close to the route of the wedding procession, giant screens were erected in Hyde Park. They ensured that nobody missed a moment of the celebrations. The police commissioner, Sir Paul Stevenson, had told his officers that morning they should appreciate the honour of being involved. And how they did. They could enjoy their role as the traditional, friendly bobby on the street, an increasingly rare opportunity in the modern world.
before long, the Mall became a sea of Union flags as the huge crowds moved slowly forward.
At the Victoria Memorial, 500,000 people were marshalled gently into place.
Everyone was hoping they would get right up to the palace gates for the big moment.
The officer in charge of this unprecedented operation said, with some obvious relief, that it had been an amazing success. And who would argue with that? It was a captivated audience. A vast army of Middle England royalists, young and old. There were Londoners, away-day travellers, and overseas visitors.
At 1:25, the curtains behind those famous balcony doors began to twitch. The lucky few who'd made it all the way to the railings primed their cameras. And then, right on cue, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge stepped onto the balcony. "Wow," said Catherine. And William, too, though used to great royal occasions such as this, seemed taken aback at the sheer volume of the crowds. Awesome, he seemed to say. The Queen led the rest of the family out. Slowly they all found their place. For Carol and Michael Middleton, this surely must have been the moment when the reality of the extraordinary transition their daughter had now made hit home. Something approaching 1 million people were cheering their girl. She was their princess, their duchess, their future queen. And by rights, Mr. and Mrs. Middleton would now be expected to curtsy to their own daughter. Catherine herself looked supremely happy and thoroughly at home with her new in-laws. She was proving time and again that she's a mature young woman who's entered into a unique lifestyle with her eyes wide open. All of this was fascinating for the crowds, but everyone knew what they were really waiting for: the couple's first public kiss. The roar of approval seemed to stretch all the way back to Admiralty Arch. For one little bridesmaid, though, Grace Van Curtsum, it all seemed a bit much. She put her hands over her ears and scowled. Prince Charles was taking a grandfatherly interest in his wife's little granddaughter, Eliza. William, it seemed, had rather enjoyed the effect his kiss had had on the crowds. He knew they wanted more. "One more?" he asked his wife. This time he lingered longer. The crowds went into a frenzy. There was one last spectacle, a wedding tribute from the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. Over London skyline thundered a Lancaster, flanked by a Spitfire and a Hurricane, great symbols of British resistance during the war years. and an even deeper roar when they were followed precisely 30 seconds later by 2 state-of-the-art typhoons and 2 tornadoes blasting overhead in box formation. It was the Queen who decided it was time for the wedding celebrations to move back into the privacy of the palace. 650 guests were waiting for the reception to get fully underway. The Queen's chefs had prepared 10,000 canapes, and there was plenty of champagne to be enjoyed. As her husband led her back through the palace doors, Catherine couldn't resist one last look over her shoulder. A very special memory of a very special wedding day. For the crowds around the palace and along the wedding route, the party had already lasted many hours. But all over the country, other street parties were just getting going. Thousands were held in towns and villages up and down the land. And of course, this was an extra bank holiday, with Easter creating 2 4-day weekends in a row. The country was in the mood for fun. The parties gave children a special memory to take with them into later life. A memory of the time everyone joined together to mark a new milestone in the history of an ancient monarchy. It had been announced that William and Catherine would be heading back to Clarence House for a rest before the evening celebrations, but no one expected them to make the short journey in quite the style they did. Would it be a Rolls-Royce? Or a Bentley? Or the State Landau again? No. This was going to be a modern end to a traditional wedding celebration. The crowd peered. An engine started. Was that really the future monarch driving his father's old blue convertible? An Aston Martin given to Prince Charles on his 21st birthday? In the passenger seat, Catherine, still wearing the gown in which she had made her vows a few hours earlier, clearly thought it was hilarious. As the car rolled out of the gates of the palace, astonishment quickly turned to cheers. They drove slowly, giving the crowds as close a view as possible. And they both looked delighted when, overhead, a bright yellow Sea King helicopter made a surprise fly past. A wedding tribute to the search and rescue pilot Prince. The number plate bore all the hallmarks of a plan dreamt up by best man Prince Harry, along with the L plate and the balloons.
Jenny, the biggest surprise of the day, must have given the police an extra headache. But despite the security concerns, it was possible for a royal heir and his bride to drive themselves between 2 palaces. Of course, there were protection officers in a vehicle behind them, but this was a remarkable, fun scene in a country that's had its security problems in the past.
William was enjoying being behind the wheel, motoring sedately down towards Stableyard Road. And then, as quickly as the moment had begun, it ended. The car disappeared through the gates of Clarence House. The Dude and the Duchess, as Prince Harry later dubbed them, were gone. A day that had started with so much expectation from the crowds and the country was almost over. But what a day it had been. From fairy tale dresses to balcony kisses. Trees in the Abbey to balloons on the car. This had been a remarkable royal wedding, and one that neither they nor we will ever forget.
This wedding is going to be huge, and it's what we do best. There's no country in the world that can equal us for pomp and circumstance.
I think there's an enormous amount of interest in this wedding around the world. Prince William is a very eligible bachelor, and people have been waiting for a long time to find out who he's going to get married to.
But it's massive. Look at the press interest ever since that engagement announcement in last year, and the follow-up from that has been quite exceptional. It's going to be, you know, a major event.
I think it's without doubt that William is actually dreading this wedding. He hates pomp and ceremony, he hates flummery, he hates all that sort of thing. And I think he will be thinking now, God, I just want to get this over with, and I want to go back to Anglesey and be a helicopter pilot with his new wife.
she said that she'd met this really nice boy, and she said, boy. I said, right. I said, what's his name? And she said, Willie.
We were on a trip with some very sick children, and at the end William said to me, you know, Arthur, you must never retire. And I said, William, I'm not going to retire till I take your wedding pictures. He said, you'll have a bit of a wait. Well, it wasn't too long.
After years of waiting, speculation and rumours, Prince William of Wales and Catherine Middleton are to be married. And nobody who watched their smiling faces as they announced their engagement could deny that these were two people who were very much in love.
You know, when I first met Kate, I knew there was something very special about him, and that I knew that there was possibly something that I wanted to explore there. But we ended up being friends for a while, and that just sort of was a good sort of foundation. I'm obviously extremely funny, and she loves that, so it's really good.
This marriage is important to the future of the monarchy because people see William as the new golden boy, and with his beautiful bride, they can carry forward maybe where Charles and Diana left off, or maybe they can do what Charles and Diana never did, which was work as a brilliant team. And you know, the world is really their oyster. They can do so much, and I think that's what the Queen sees in this union, and it's very, very important that it works, and she is putting all her support behind it.
I think the royal family is obviously incredibly fond of Kate. The Queen must have given her discreet seal of approval. Prince Charles was very effusive when they announced their engagement, and Prince Harry gave him the ultimate accolade, saying that Kate was like a sister to him.
So, Britain is set for the biggest royal event since the marriage of Charles and Diana over 30 years ago. But this is going to be a very modern royal marriage, of a new, modern style of royal couple.
I think most would agree that it stands a very, very high chance of success, this marriage, because they know each other so well. That said, they've got more pressure on them than almost any other royal couple before them, because obviously the Queen has had 3 out of her 4 children divorcing, so the pressure on William to make this work is unbelievable.
Over the next hour, we're going behind the scenes of the biggest royal event for 30 years. An exclusive glimpse of the people who make it all happen. From the chefs to the cake makers, and from the florists to the carriages. And, of course, the dress.
Everything, from where people are sitting, to the timing, to the carriages, to the food, the drink, the flowers, everything will be planned to the tiniest detail.
On the day of the wedding, when they're coming back from the church, everything in the kitchen starts to get a bit hectic. Before that, it's quite regimented and organised, but the sooner it gets to the time for the wedding breakfast, that's when the panic buttons start.
It's an amazing feeling to create a royal wedding cake, because it's something different, it's something unique. This is possibly a cake for the future King of England.
They're calling it one of the great love stories of our time. And it all started when William first met Kate at St Andrews University in Scotland, when they were both just 19.
We were friends for over a year first, and it just sort of blossomed from then on. We just spent more time with each other, had a good giggle, had lots of fun, and realised we shared the same interests, and just, you know, had a really good time. She's got a really nice sense of humour, which kind of helps me because I've got a very dirty sense of humour. So it was good fun. We had a really good laugh, and then things happened. It was a slow burning thing. It started off as a friendship. They were in halls together, they had classes together, they had things in common. It then extended to getting to know each other better on the sports field, and then it was the fashion show that allegedly, and I think truthfully, made William view Kate in a totally different way. And I'll never forget it, she walked out in this sort of amazing, sort of slightly see-through negligee, and most people there realised his eyes just sort of followed her around. That was the day that he began to look at her in a different way.
Well, at St Andrews, girls literally threw themselves at William. They really did. And Kate didn't. And of course, you know, all men like to chase. And I think she gave him a bit of a good run. And obviously he started to fall deeply in love with her.
They lived together in Sinnet University. They shared a flat and later a house. They ordered takeaways. They cooked together in the kitchen and burnt the odd saucepan and generally lived like any other student romance.
I think, needless to say, William was very much viewed as a catch by the young ladies at the time. He was also physically looking very good. There were really nice shots of him in sort of camel-coloured jumpers and blue jeans, sort of, you know, slumping on the bonnet of his car outside Highgrove. So he had become a man, and I think the women of the world were aware of that.
Eventually, Prince William popped the question to Catherine while on a romantic holiday at the Liwa Game Reserve in Kenya.
He carried the engagement ring, his mother's engagement ring, which quite frankly is worth a fortune, around in his rucksack for 3 weeks. Thank goodness he didn't lose it.
I think that the fact that William gave Kate his mother's ring was incredibly important, because they are the two women that he's obviously loved more than anyone else, and they are sort of united by the ring. And Kate's intelligent enough to know that, you know, it's a sign of great respect that he gave her his mother's ring.
On the day of the photo call, we had a cup of tea with William and Kate, several of us, and he said to me, "I'd like you to meet Kate after," and introduced me to her. And he then went on to, you know, show me the ring that, of course, is Diana's ring. And I said, "Well, I must take a photograph of that." And that's when he called me and said, "Arthur, you come and take a picture of the ring," and I did. And she was so nervous, her hand was shaking, he had to hold her hand steady so I could photograph it.
So the date is set, Friday the 29th of April. The wedding invites have gone out and the venue has been chosen, Westminster Abbey.
The whole point of the Abbey, with Henry III building it, was to build the most magnificent church in the world for these great ceremonies. I think it really was established by the marriage of the Queen and then the Queen's sister, Princess Margaret, her daughter, Princess Anne. And it was really a big break by then with tradition when Prince Charles went to St. Paul's in 1981. Before the ceremony begins, Prince William, his best man, the royal family will all be in place up before the high altar. And then Kate will process up from the West End, through the whole length of the nave, through the choir screen, to join her future husband up on the great steps where their kneelers are going to be placed. And then the ceremony takes place up by the high altar, and then at the end of it, they process back down through the choir, through the nave, to the great clanging chimes of the organ, and in a way to the applause perhaps of people outside the Abbey who've been watching it on great screens.
William has chosen his brother Harry to be his best man at his wedding, while Kate Middleton's sister Philippa will be her maid of honour. Around 2,000 guests have been invited to the wedding ceremony at Westminster Abbey, and a further 600 to the reception at Buckingham Palace.
Well, the wedding is scheduled to start at 11 o'clock, which means it will start at 11 o'clock. And they really dislike the bride being late. I think Diana was 32 seconds late, and it sort of wobbled the arrangements. And after the wedding, William and Kate will drive back in an open carriage to Buckingham Palace, and I think they are then scheduled to be on the balcony for the kiss at about 1 o'clock. And then there will be a reception at the palace, and William and Kate will drive back to Clarence House for a rest before the evening's festivities begin.
This wedding is going to be quite an unusual royal wedding. Kate is the first commoner for 350 years to marry a future king, so there will be a variety of middle-class relatives of the Middletons, as well as the usual array of royals and aristocrats and heads of state.
The ticket to the Abbey is the hottest ticket in town. We know that. And I think the main thrust is going to be William and Kate's friends. I mean, obviously after 9 years together, they've got mostly mutual friends. But William's also said that he wants some representatives of his charity there. Then obviously there'll be the Middleton family and their friends.
I think William's perfect idea of a wedding would be an elopement. I think he would rather go off to Kenya, to Jacka Craig's estate, get married there in privacy with his parents and her parents and a few close friends. I think William would like the wedding to number no more than about 25. However, that ain't gonna happen.
One of the key elements of any wedding are the flowers. Edward Goodyear in London have been providing them to the royal family since the time of Queen Victoria, and are currently florists by royal appointment to both Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. They are creating one of the table arrangements for the wedding reception in Buckingham Palace.
Kate and William, they're obviously very English and very classic. They probably go quite neutral because it's sort of the most modern trend at the moment. And it's very sort of wild and country feel, which we think they'll probably both quite like because they don't like the regalness. They're sort of down-to-earth modern young couple.
The table centres are extremely important because of the size of the rooms. So they do need some very special arrangements.
We've got about a selection of about 8 different varieties of flowers just to fill it up and give it a bit of variety. But obviously all sort of within the same colour scheme and different shapes and textures to make the arrangement look quite varied.
Her Majesty the Queen is very interested in flowers, and she loves particular flowers, which I can't say really because that's a personal thing, but she definitely loves flowers, and she actually loves arranging her own personal flowers that she's given.
This one I've got here is lilac, which is very popular in spring. That's which will be readily available at the time of their getting married. And you've got the big white hydrangea heads here. They're quite sort of classic and English, and this is the Gilder Rose, just to give it a bit of variety and a bit of colour.
The inspiration is that the arrangement is very English and could have come from a very large church in the country. It's got an English feel to it and has English flowers, but it also has the Kentian fern, which of course is where William and Kate were engaged or got engaged.
This is a cream avalanche rose, English grown, and we believe this is what Lady Diana had in her bouquet on her wedding day when she married Charles. Just quite a nice link because we believe obviously William wants her to be part of the day, and we think that they might pick that up with the flowers. We've got these beautiful orchids to drape in, which Diana had in her bouquet. Not traditionally English, but incredibly beautiful and quite modern for a young couple. When this is on the table, it's going to smell absolutely amazing, because obviously you've got the roses and the lilac. It's going to smell fantastic, but you've also got some sort of organic foliages, so you've got the rosemary and that sort of thing in there, and that's going to smell absolutely beautiful.
When you're dealing with a royal event, there is always the pressure of doing the work absolutely to the top standard, and sometimes because there are many other staff working on the tables or whatever, that provides some difficulties, but the pressure is really because it's such a special occasion always.
This is obviously a lot bigger arrangement than what the average person would have on their wedding day, mainly because they're royals and it's going to be seen by the world, and it will be replicated a million times over and watched by millions and millions, so a lot of pressure for whoever's doing it.
The wedding dress is for many the main talking point of the day. But what will it look like? And who's making it?
I think when you go on the catwalk, you know, they would probably put like a veil and stuff. And you
Elizabeth Emanuel made the iconic fairy tale wedding dress for Princess Diana and knows all too well the pressures of the job.
Well, when I've got to say, when we heard that we were going to be doing the wedding dress, that's when the pressure started, because we were aware that there was going to be hundreds of millions of people watching, and so although we tried to put that to the back of our minds, you know, it was lucky we had a lot to think about, and we were very, very busy, because otherwise, you know, it would have almost been too much.
Diana was very hands-on in the design and creation of her dress.
Well, we wanted to make the dress very dramatic, and we thought, well, you know, traditionally the wedding dress does have a train, and but let's make it the longest possible. So Diana liked that idea that we would make it longer than any other royal wedding train. So the longest, we'd done a bit of research, I think was 23 feet. So we thought, let's add on the extra 2, make it really, really long. But still, looking back at the footage from those years ago, you know, you see her coming out the coach, and that is my favourite shot of all time, when she's coming out of the coach, and she's virtually at the top of the steps of St Paul's, and her train is still in the coach. And I just love that, and I don't think either of us realised the impact. You know, we were thinking in our heads of doing the dress, the train, and visions of it up the aisle, but that bit was my favourite, when she was going up the steps. I loved that.
30 years on, and it will be Catherine Middleton's turn to stun the world in her own wedding dress. But what will it look like?
I think it's very, very possible that Catherine may want to, you know, surprise everybody, because, you know, she's seen being photographed and making statements with what she wears now, and it may be she'll want people to, you know, be surprised. There may be an interesting twist on the design, something unexpected, and especially if there are no rules and regulations, you don't really know what that might be.
I don't think she's going to basically go for the typical meringue, but I think something very, very maybe fitted on the actual waist and fitted onto the hips, but the fullness at the side. Possibly, I think, a full-length veil and a very regal sort of type tiara. I think possibly with a hair down, possibly maybe half up, half down. But I think she's generally going to go for something very classic, nothing too over the top.
I think Kate's gone from a traditional home counties girl in her cowboy boots and jeans and flowery skirts to quite an elegant young woman, and I'm sure, just as Princess Diana was emulated around the world, I'm sure Kate will be. Her top-shop dress that she wore on her 25th birthday, and the Easter dress that she wore for her engagement announcement, sold out within hours.
I think Kate will become a complete and utter superstar. Everywhere she goes, she's going to be photographed. Her clothes are already copied. Her look, her hair, her shoes, what she says. People will hang on to her every word. And, you know, she will be like, she's our Hollywood, she's our movie star.
Jessica Hay was Catherine's closest friend and roommate at Marlborough College. For 3 years, they shared their work, their secrets, and their crushes.
William did come to a hockey game at one point when we were at Marlborough, and obviously Catherine is an amazing hockey player. She played centre forward, and she was the captain of the first hockey team. And I think as soon as he saw her, his eyes lit up. She said, I'd love to become a princess one day. I'd love to marry Prince William. It would be just, you know, the icing on the cake. It would be a wonderful life, and he seems like a lovely guy. And the fact that she was so down to earth about it made it seem like she probably was going to go, you know, that's probably fate. And it's happened. It's very, very odd.
For Kate's generation, William was definitely the #1 pin-up. He was the most eligible bachelor in Britain, if not the world. So every girl wanted to snare him, and I'm sure Kate was no different.
But according to Jessica, it wasn't only William who was a pin-up.
all of the older boys absolutely loved her. She was put on the top of the fit list. So, but she wasn't really interested. She preferred to just concentrate on her own future rather than, you know, boys running after her, which they did.
I think she's a very sensible girl. I think she's very grounded. She comes from a very loving and stable family, and I think that's what attracts William.
Obviously, after Marlborough, she went to university. We lost touch for a couple of months, and then she got back in touch with me. And I was traveling around America at the time, and she said that she'd met this really nice boy. And she said, "Boy." I said, "Right." I said, "What's his name?" And she said, "Willie." Willie. I said, "All right, it sounds nice." And she said, "Oh, you've met him before, Eton." And it was. Then we found out that it was the same Willie that I'd met years and years before. And she did say that he was absolutely lovely, and she said she thinks she might have fallen in love.
No wedding is complete without a stunning wedding cake. David McCaffrey has made them for the royal weddings of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, as well as Prince Edward and Sophie Rhys-Jones. And now he's busy on a huge creation for William and Catherine.
And when I'm embracing a royal wedding cake, I'm embracing the monarchy, but the history of the monarchy, so the grandeur, etc. So it's going to be something very lavish, very ornate, something that people are going to go, hopefully, wow. And, you know, it'll just be standing there and they'll go, I want the wow factor kind of thing, and big.
David has decided to create a massive 7-tiered fruit cake, covered first in marzipan and decorated with royal icing sugar.
The first step of preparation would be putting marzipan on the fruit cake. There's two reasons that we do this. One, it's a surface to coat the royal icing onto, and secondly, it seals the fruit cake from the royal icing and keeps the cake fresh. It's like plastering a wall. So if you're into plastering, it's the same scenario. You're spreading the icing onto the cake, coating the cake around the sides. Next stage is the overpiping. Once you've done all your coating and you're happy with it, you know, weigh the cake up, start with the piping, and basically we're just going to build layers and layers of piping. And there's no rules, there's no, you know, you can go as fine or as detailed as you want to, but to create the lavish look, the ornate look, the antique look, etc., we want to go with lots of different layers. So we would start with a thicker piping tube and start piping the layers around once the pattern's sort of being created, and then from that more and more layers on top. And it's a case of keeping your hands straight rather than shaking, because if you're feeling nervous, if you're having a bad day, obviously the piping won't turn out as good as it can do, you know. So it's all about the mindset, it's all about staying calm and enjoying the experience rather than getting stressed out about it, you know. Sometimes I do, but you know, 99% of the time I'm happy, and I'm just saying to myself, it doesn't matter what time it is, it doesn't matter if I have to work extra hours to do this, it's a case of giving my best shot and getting it so I'm happy with it at the same time as hopefully everyone else will be. It's an amazing feeling to create a royal wedding cake, because it's something different, it's something unique, it's something special, you know. I mean, I treat everyone, every bride and groom comes to us as special, but this is possibly a cake for the future King of England. The next stage will be putting the flowers onto the cake, and we design the cake so, in effect, if you look at it, the top tier looks like a crown. It could be on your head. So the flowers really on the top tier decided how the rest of the cake was going to be. So as you look at it, you've got the crown of flowers and then just subtle, you know, flowers down the cake. The flowers are made of sugar, but it's a different type of sugar. It's not an icing sugar, it's like a fondant icing, it's called. It's like a Play-Doh, like a plasticine, and you obviously mould it to soften it down, and then you can texture it and then work it. Now, we don't use any cutters or modelling tools. These are all handmade, so every flower, like a natural flower, will have its own personality, so no flower ever looks the same. So from the point of view of looking at the finished cake, it's got more of a natural look of real flowers.
After days of work, it all comes down to the careful final stacking of the finished cake. One slip and it's disaster.
But I just knew at one point, you know, that big, I hope I don't drop it. And in the end, as you say, I put it on. We were all right.
For any bride, her hair is just as important as her dress. Lino Carbosiero, at the exclusive Daniel Galvin salon in London, has done the hair at a number of royal events, as well as for Princess Diana. He has very clear ideas on how Catherine's hair should look on her wedding day.
I think the hairstyle's got to be something quite streamlined and detailed, but not overpowering. It mustn't be about the hair. It must be about her, her body, her face, and then everything else just... She's the picture, everything else is the frame. I've decided to go with this Spanish-styled señorita look. I think that because of the beauty of the face and the eyes and everything, I just think that it should be off the face. I definitely feel that there'll be that sophistication, but that modernness with it. And I feel that there's got to be detail, and the detail needs to be at the back, because the front is going to be completely all about the tiara. She will wear a veil, and I think through the veil you want to see a little bit of intricacy and a little bit of detail. So you by combing a square section from where you want the tiara to start, you bring the hair lightly forward, okay? You don't hold it tight, you loosely hold that, slightly gripped, and you backcomb. Backcombing is basically pushing the comb down into itself, and while I'm doing that, I'm releasing some of the hair up there, and what that will do is just give you some scaffolding in there, okay? And that's what that's now going to be, that's going to be this supporting that, you see? So when I push that in and bring that forward, it's just going to give a little bit of detail behind the tiara, otherwise it would be just all one big tiara. The reason I've left this bit of hair out here is this bit of hair here is what's going to tie it up later. It's going to come round and just clean up any bits and bobs that I've left out, okay? With Kate, I think that if she just has a little bit more detail put around the front of the style that she's got, yeah, we'll have a lot of people coming in and having the cape, without a doubt. Whatever she does now, from now on, even if she does a little bit slightly shorter fringe or a bit more layering, or if it comes up slightly, it'll be called the cape and everyone will want it. I'm really happy with that, and as you can see, I know you're wearing a shirt, but the minute I do that, look at the shape of the neck, the face. Look, I mean, it's a beautiful shape. For me, fit for a princess.
The wedding will be a huge day for Britain, with over 1 million people expected to line the parade route from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey. But with the size of the event come real issues of security and threats from terrorists or just cranks. Ken Wharf was the personal bodyguard to the Princess of Wales and protected her and Prince William for nearly a decade.
To the left now we have Buckingham Palace, and there are 3 main gates at the palace, what is referred to as the North Centre and the South Centre, which are gates used on a daily basis by staff. But the North Centre gate, the gate in the middle, is the gate known as the ceremonial gate, which will be the gate that Prince William and Catherine will leave and begin their route now along the Mall here towards Westminster Abbey. I mean, security of any royal operation is always something that's taken, you know, incredibly seriously. So you'll see, quite honestly, an operation here that's almost unprecedented in the sense that we can expect to see body scanners on the route, and there will be some serious checking of individuals on the route itself. It won't be just turn up and be a free-for-all, because the risk will be too great. But the actual route itself is small enough in the scale of things to give this as near as 100% security as possible. Just imagine this route we're on now, that, you know, there are probably between 6-10 deep of people all the way down this way, all the way down the Mall here. And it's estimated that on the streets of London alone there will be millions rather than thousands. The police now have to prepare for this. The greatest saviour in the sense is that Scotland Yard, the Metropolitan Police, have a real checked, trusted track record on this, in the sense that we police major events, ceremonial events and world events. So I have no doubt in my mind that given the complications of this, that the Yard will come up with the goods on the day. Of that I'm absolutely certain. Ahead of me now, the Westminster, Palace of Westminster, the House of Commons, and my right-hand side now, crowds already outside number 10 Downing Street itself, guarded by the railings and police, and that's where the Prime Minister is. And then this is really the closing stages of the journey from Buckingham Palace. And now, as you can see, the Westminster Abbey here, and the procession would slow down here to do a left turn in front of the west door. So the carriage would stop here and then process through to the west door of the Abbey.
The royal family will travel to and from Westminster Abbey in a fleet of carriages from the Royal Mews. Barry Luck has been a carriage driver for over 30 years and has driven at many royal events.
The royal family will be using carriages, and this would be their transport. Country as well, they'd use them out in the country to go to church and that sort of thing. There's a good lens. The vehicle is suspended on leather straps which are called C-springs, so it's a chassis and a body which are separate, and it does float about. So there is a motion sickness can happen, yes. With a carriage like this, there would have often been a rail across here with spikes on it to stop the urchins getting on the back. And if an urchin was riding, sitting on the axle, somebody from on the pavement would shout "whip behind," and the coachman would whip behind to try and knock them off the back of the carriage. These are 10 and 11-year-old Polish horses, and we've had them from youngsters, bred them for the job, and they're very good in London traffic. They will put up with most things. These horses love doing weddings and events, and with his people about, they certainly do show off, yes. I think they can sense an occasion, and they often work and play to the people that are there. As you can see, this is fairly tight in here. People were smaller in those days, so 4 people would have sat in there comfortably, where now it is a little bit more of a struggle. And to get a wedding dress in through there, it is tight. Everything has to be perfect on the day. There isn't any margin for error. It's rehearsed, even to the person putting the blocks on the wheels to stop it moving when they're getting in. It is rehearsed to perfection, so they just cannot go wrong. They mustn't go wrong.
The wedding reception at Buckingham Palace will be a lavish affair. The very finest china, silverware and crystal, all set up and served with military precision.
I think the thing about going to Buckingham Palace is that you are absolutely overawed by all the things around you. They're very, very big rooms with high ceilings, and the most magnificent collection of pictures, magnificent collections of china. And that's when you see the measuring of the table, you know, so that each place is so many inches away from the next place, and that people aren't sort of elbowing each other out because, you know, they're too crushed in.
The table settings upstairs are, they've got to be absolutely perfect. First of all, the table has to be polished, and everything is laid down absolutely obsessively, and it's measured with a ruler, and everything is absolutely perfect.
And I'm not saying it's all sort of hugely over-gilded or anything like that, but I mean, they have got beautiful collections of china and beautiful centerpieces of things to put on buffet tables, of wonderful silverware or even giltware. You've got the sense of occasion just by walking through those doors.
The party in the evening, well, you know, William probably wants to have an absolute knees up and get all his favourite rappers there and things. But I think it is given by his father, Prince Charles, so I think it will probably be stadish. But, you know, who knows, when you've got those boys there, you know, the place will probably rock like it's never rocked before.
It's up to the kitchens at Buckingham Palace to serve a buffet-style meal to the 600 guests at the reception. Graham Newbold was a royal chef for over a decade and has created his own classic menu for the occasion.
The starter is going to be quenelles of brill to Harry. That's with lobster sauce, white wine sauce, asparagus spears, a medallion of lobsters. And the first thing I have to do is prepare the lobster. The royal family like clean sort of food, really fresh stuff like salmon caught from Balmoral, and fresh lamb and things like that. They don't like anything that's been processed with E numbers or anything like that. This dish is the actual first course for Prince Charles and Princess Diana's wedding, way back in 1981. The royal family aren't really fussy eaters. They can go out any time and get flashy food, but they don't want that. There's no need for that. This is a fillet of brill, very nice fish, similar to turbot, but a little bit smaller. Quite expensive, but lovely flavour. There are 20 chefs that work at Buckingham Palace. Most of them are English. That's probably because the royals like English food. They've been there like a long time, like over 20 years. What I'm trying to do here is build up layers of flavour. The next to go in will be the garlic. So, all that lovely flavour. The kitchens at Buckingham Palace are absolutely massive. And I suppose they've got to be to accommodate 20 chefs. But very, very well equipped, modern and spotless. Put in about a third of a bottle. When working for the royals, everything is regimented down to the second. The pieces of brill, put them in the food processor. So these are called quenelles. If you did the same shape with ice cream, it would be called rocher. And the royal family love both, really. This dish is a classical dish invented by Auguste Escoffier. When you're a chef at Buckingham Palace, you need to be a really good all-rounder. You need to be able to make anything, really. Fish, pies, roasts, desserts, afternoon teas, breakfasts. So it's not that easy. William sometimes used to come into the kitchen and have a bit of a carry-on and start throwing golf balls at me, and I just sort of had to put him right, really. This is one of the favourite dishes of the Queen. That's probably why it's been chosen for such a special occasion. And there we have quenelle brill to Paris. Also a nice bit of lobster garnish and some asparagus. I'm now preparing the potatoes for the rack of lamb à la du Barry. These are what's known as chateau potatoes. They have 7 sides, and it's a classic potato, invented again by Escoffier. Her Majesty is absolutely fantastic. No airs and graces. She has such an aura about her when she walks in the room, and you can do nothing but respect her. I mean, she's really, really great. I'm going to put the lamb in the oven now, but first I'm going to drain the fat off and use it for my potatoes. There we go. That should take approximately 10 minutes. When you're doing a big function, like a state visit or a wedding, I mean, there is quite a bit of stress on it, because you've got to realise that, I mean, most of the world is watching, and you can't make any mistakes. It is a little bit stressful. This is a classic dish. There we go. Rack of lamb a la Dubarry, fit for a prince and a princess.
So after a day of pomp and ceremony, of massive crowds and huge feasts, it will be time for the newly wedded Prince William of Wales and Princess Catherine to head off on honeymoon and start their new life together.
I don't think one can have a better ambassador than a gorgeous young couple, which William and Kate are. I think they will be fantastic ambassadors for this country.
Kate will be a breath of fresh air for the monarchy. She's very comfortable in her own skin and very stable, and she's not going to embarrass them by selling her story or talking to reporters and briefing them about things going on behind the scenes.
Kate will become a complete and utter superstar. Everywhere she goes, she's going to be photographed. Her clothes are already copied. Her look, her hair, her shoes, what she says. People will hang on to her every word.
I think that they are going to be the most solid royal couple we've had since the Queen and Prince Philip. I definitely think so. They are completely in love, dedicated to each other. They mesh well together, they work well together, and I think they both have the same personalities, but above all, they're very normal.
I think William and Kate can conquer the world. I think every country in the world will want them as guests and to come and see them, and the crowds will be as big as it was for Charles and Diana.
They've got more pressure on them than almost any other royal couple before them, because obviously the Queen has had 3 out of her 4 children divorcing, so the pressure on William to make this work is unbelievable. I think it will work, I really believe it will, and I personally obviously wish them the very best of luck, but by God it's going to be a tough job.
This was the moment they'd all been waiting for. The kiss that said it all. Prince William and his bride, the new Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, sent the crowds into a frenzy as they sealed their marriage with a very public show of love. 1 million people had converged on Buckingham Palace to share their happiness. 2 billion people were watching around the world. It was a day that brought a smile to everyone's face. Outside Westminster Abbey, the crowds had begun to gather from early morning. Some hardy souls had spent the past 3 nights camping out to ensure they had the best possible view.
I've been to their wedding, the Queen, when she was a youngster. I've followed up with Princess Diana, Margaret, and I'm here today for William. I believe in the royal family.
Oh, I'm here just to experience the whole thing, see the pomp and the circumstance, and, you know, just to be here and get the feeling of the crowd and the excitement. I love it.
Everyone wanted a ringside seat as Prince William finally tied the knot with Catherine Middleton, the girl he'd met and fallen in love with almost 10 years earlier. A mile or so away, in a luxury suite at the Goring Hotel, the bride and her family were getting ready. Around the corner at Buckingham Palace, the rather grey early morning revealed a quiet calm. But behind the palace walls, the well-oiled machinery of an occasion such as this was already in action. Outside the palace and down the Mall, the crowds who'd spent the night in makeshift tents were beginning to stir. The mood was one of growing excitement at the prospect of the pageantry and partying that was to follow. The doommongers who had predicted that no one would care about the royal wedding were about to be proved comprehensively wrong. At the Abbey, everything was now in place. At William and Catherine's request, 8 imposing trees, maples and hornbeams, had been brought in from the royal estates to mark their route up the aisle. In the splendour of this 1,000-year-old royal peculiar, as it's known, meaning that it's neither a cathedral nor a parish church, 38 sovereigns have been crowned, including, of course, our present Queen. And this was to be the 16th royal wedding to be held at Westminster Abbey. The Queen herself was married here, as was her mother and her sister Margaret. By 9 o'clock, the first of the 1,900 guests had begun to arrive. With roads around the whole area sealed off, they'd been asked to allow plenty of time to get to the Abbey. And this was certainly an occasion that no one wanted to miss. All of them felt privileged to be there to witness a moment in history, the marriage of our future king to a girl who'll one day be Queen Consort. The ushers would have their work cut out, seating 1,000 family and friends of the bride and groom, 50 members of the British royal family, 40 foreign royals, 60 governors-general and prime ministers from around the world, and some 200 diplomats and government officials. 80 representatives from Prince William's charities were also amongst those invited to the society event of the decade. And of course, the fashion stakes were high. Everyone had put in a huge amount of effort, some with more success than others. The fashion expert James Sherwood was among those who cast a critical eye over the results.
The press were sometimes less than kind, but I actually think the occasion was incredibly well dressed. As far as British millinery is concerned, I think the royal wedding has demonstrated that the hat is, if not making a comeback, it's certainly triumphant. And actually what we did see in Westminster Abbey were hats that take a lot of, I don't know, it takes a lot of poise to wear these hats, and it takes a lot of commitment, you know. When one looks at the Queen, formal day dress is the Queen's working wardrobe, but for 90% of the women in the Abbey, this was an exception to a rule and something that they really had to rise to the occasion, and they certainly did. It's rather nice for me to see an occasion like the royal wedding where the uniforms are perfect, the mourning tales are perfect, and the ladies have made a terrific effort. We read from the invitation that it was mourning tales, lounge suits and uniforms were all acceptable, but it's rather nice to see that the chaps came down in favour of uniform and mourning tales. And also, you know, we see a lot of RAF uniform because Prince William's currently serving with the RAF in emergency search and rescue. I think what stood out for me at the royal wedding, that it was just lovely to see well-dressed people who know exactly what they're doing, they know how to behave, they're dressed in their best. And you can see waving the Dowager Duchess of Devonshire, Deborah Mitford, the last of the Mitford sisters, with her daughter-in-law, the present Duchess of Devonshire. I always love to see the dowagers because they're almost like galleons sailing forth in the Abbey. It's heaven for me to see, you know, all the pearl chokers with the amethyst clasps and all the classic British family jewels coming out. And see the chaps make the best of themselves too, because I defy any woman to say that a man doesn't look very handsome in a morning coat, especially if it's cut by Savile Row. And Prince Harry's beau, Chelsea Davy, from Cape Town, looking terribly Cape Town, in a sort of Alberta Ferretti cocktail dress, which is almost off the shoulder. Almost as acceptable. Off the shoulder is absolutely not, particularly for Westminster Abbey. She's wearing quite a dinky little, it's almost like a button of a hat, designed by Victoria Grant, who I believe is also a favourite of the Duchess of Cambridge.
William and Catherine had been careful not to make this a celebrity event, but a handful of their famous friends were invited. Among them, David and Victoria Beckham.
I think David Beckham's made many a heart swoon as he walked up the Abbey with the new hairstyle, the Elvis, the quiff. Unusual to see a cravat. Mr. Beckham pulled this off, of course, with his usual style. He's wearing Ralph Lauren, almost bespoke, made to measure, I think we'd call it. Mrs. Beckham with a dress for the Victoria Beckham label. A lot of the press thought it was black and made appropriate comments saying that, you know, she looks as though she was in mourning. It's not, it's a midnight blue silk. She is pregnant and I think she looks absolutely magnificent.
Elton John was there.
I thought it was rather marvellous that the lion's share of the chaps in the Abbey actually wore mourning tails. I mean, even Sir Elton John and his partner David Furnish.
The film director Guy Ritchie is a friend of both William and Catherine.
And here we have Guy Ritchie, who's played it incredibly safe, wearing a terribly traditional black morning coat with the pinstripe trouser and the grey waistcoat. Grey or buff waistcoats are really the form for formal day dress, but at the wedding we did see these wonderful, quite bright yellow waistcoats that seemed to set a fashion. It was terrific to see. We know that the Queen has let it be known that she rather likes morning coats to be buttoned. She doesn't like them to be left unbuttoned.
Tara Palmer-Tompkinson, an old family friend, seemed intent on making quite a fashion statement.
And the socialite Tara Palmer-Tompkinson, this electric blue number that really is off the shoulder, and this sort of boat-shaped hat that points directly down on her nose. It's a very similar shape to Princess Eugenie's, both designed by Philip Tracy. In fact, one would go so far as to say that Philip Tracy probably had a patent on the entire wedding.
Ben Fogle, the TV presenter and adventurer, made a documentary with William in Africa and has since become a friend. For his heavily pregnant wife, Marina, the biggest worry of the day was that she would go into labour.
Ben Fogle, the television presenter, a very popular sight in the Abbey. I do love that sort of crazy public school hair. Other nationalities would think it looked a bit sloppy, but actually to the Brits that's perfectly pucker.
Also among the guests at the Abbey, the journalist Tom Bradby, who's known the couple for some time and who was invited to conduct their engagement interview. His wife, Claudia, is a jewellery designer, and she once worked with Catherine. Prime Minister David Cameron wore traditional morning dress, but his wife Samantha surprised fashion pundits by choosing to go hatless.
The green Burberry dress I did think looked absolutely appropriate. Wouldn't it have been so much better to have seen a hat with that ensemble?
The Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg and his wife Miriam played it safe.
It was interesting that all the British politicians dithered about wearing mourning tails because they thought it would possibly make them look slightly upper class. Actually, it just makes you look terribly well dressed, as in the case of Nick Clegg, the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party and the Deputy Prime Minister. Sir John Major dresses to prove why he absolutely did belong in the Abbey in an immaculate black mourning coat, and you notice the British gentlemen always mismatch, and so Sir John Major, we see the sort of baby blue tie, the very faded pink shirt and the grey waistcoat. It's actually spot on, totally correct. And it's always rather nice to see the foreign royals out in full force. The King of Tonga is an incredibly popular figure. And you notice that he wore a double-breasted morning coat. It's almost more cut like a frock coat, which is most unconventional, but actually it dates back to the Edwardian era.
The last great occasion to be held in the Abbey was the funeral of the Queen Mother in 2002. And 5 years earlier, the Abbey had been the venue for one of the most traumatic events in Prince William's life, the funeral of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. But now his friends, colleagues and family were gathering for a day that signalled a new and bright chapter in William's life, but a day when no doubt his mother's absence will be felt more poignantly than ever. Grand royal occasions like this are timed to the minute, and at 10:10, the crowds outside Clarence House knew that William was about to set out on his final journey as a single man. A burgundy Bentley, polished to perfection, rolled out of the gates. At last, the real show was about to get on the road. And what a show it was. Prince William looked distinguished in the famous red uniform of the Irish Guards, of which he's an honorary colonel. Having served with the Army, Navy and the RAF, he was eligible to wear any of their ceremonial uniforms, but he chose the Guards' striking red tunic with his blue garter sash and star and his RAF wings.
And we see Prince William looking rather dashing in the uniform of an honorary colonel in the Irish Guards. It had been rumoured for months that he would be wearing an RAF uniform tailored by Gibbs and Hawkes of Savile Row. This would have been in keeping because his great-grandfather, the late King George VI, wore RAF uniform and had permission from George V to wear it because it's not the uniform of the senior service.
Prince Harry, his best man, looked equally dashing in the uniform of a captain of the Household Cavalry, Blues and Royals.
Prince Harry, tailored by Dejan Skinner, is wearing the uniform of the Blues and Royals. He and his brother were painted for a National Portrait Gallery piece 2 years ago wearing the uniform of the Blues and Royals, so it was rumoured that both of the chaps would wear the same uniform, and I think it's rather wise that Prince William chose instead to wear the Irish Guards.
For some of the more stalwart royal fans who'd spent the night on a hard, cold London pavement, this was their second encounter with the princes. A handful had been able to chat with them the night before, when William and Harry had suddenly come out of Clarence House to thank the crowds for their support and good wishes. This was very much part of the younger generation steering a new course. Later it was revealed that Harry and William had made the decision on a whim and caught their press office by surprise. Now, as he made his way to the Abbey, to a crescendo of cheers, William might well have been feeling more than the few nerves he'd admitted to the night before. "All I have to do is get my lines right," he had told the crowds. An obvious reference to his parents' own wedding, when they'd both fluffed their lines. The reality of his wedding day, though, was proving that this was truly a global event. People had come from all over the world to watch the procession and join in the celebrations. As the princes approached Horse Guards, the band of the Coldstream Guards salute. One day it will fall to William as sovereign to take the salute here at the annual Trooping the Colour Parade. As the Princess of Wales once told me, the prospect of being king was something her son viewed as a great burden when he was young. Since then, Prince William has become resigned to his destiny, and perhaps now, as the crowds showed their real affection for him, it didn't seem so bad. And how proud Diana would have been of her two boys, now all grown up and so handsome.